Imagine being so powerful that entire nations obeyed your commands. Yet the thing that killed this king wasn't war, poison, or betrayal. His name was Adolf Frederick, King of Sweden. To his people, he was a ruler blessed with wealth, power, and luxury. Born into a world of royalty, Adolf Frederick enjoyed a life that most people could only dream about. His days were filled with comfort, privilege, and endless luxury. While ordinary citizens struggled through harsh winters, the king dined on the finest foods available anywhere in Europe.
In the royal courts of the 18th century, banquets were more than meals. They were displays of power, wealth, and prestige.
No expense was spared. Exotic fruits, rare wines, and enormous feasts arrived at the king's table almost every day. Among all these pleasures, one stood above the rest. Adolf Frederick had developed a legendary appetite. Friends admired it, courtiers joked about it, but nobody realized that this appetite would eventually become his greatest enemy. Then came a cold February evening in 1771, a night that would transform an ordinary royal dinner into one of history's strangest tragedies. On a cold evening in February 1771, King Adolf Frederick gathered with his guests for a grand royal dinner. The palace buzzed with excitement as servants prepared one of the most impressive feasts of the season. Music filled the halls. Noble guests enjoyed an evening of celebration and conversation. The banquet table stretched across the room, covered with dishes prepared by the kingdom's finest chefs. Lobster, smoked fish, fresh bread, and rare delicacies filled every corner of the table. Every dish reflected the wealth and prestige of the Swedish royal court. King Adolf Frederick appeared relaxed as he enjoyed the celebration with his honored guests. As the evening continued, more dishes arrived from the busy royal kitchens. The feast seemed endless, with new flavors arriving throughout the evening. Then a famous Swedish dessert was brought into the hall. The dessert was known as semla, a beloved pastry enjoyed throughout Sweden. Soft bread, sweet filling, and rich cream made it a favorite among people across the kingdom. The king was especially fond of this traditional Swedish treat. Guests watched as dessert quickly became the highlight of the evening. Conversation and laughter filled the hall as the celebration continued. According to historical accounts, the king enjoyed several servings of the famous pastry. The remarkable dinner would later become one of the most discussed royal feasts in Swedish history. Hours passed as the gathering continued late into the evening. Inside the palace, everything seemed peaceful and unforgettable. Little did anyone know that this memorable royal dinner would soon become part of history. The royal banquet continued as guests enjoyed another evening of celebration inside the palace. King Adolf Frederick appeared comfortable as the gathering continued into the evening. Guests enjoyed fine food while musicians performed throughout the hall. Servants moved gracefully between tables, ensuring every guest felt welcome. The banquet reflected centuries of royal tradition and ceremony. For the king, evenings like this were among the finest moments of court life. I thank you all for your presence.
The palace was filled with conversation, music, and celebration.
Outside, winter covered the city, while the festivities continued indoors.
Inside the royal kitchens, preparations continued long after sunset.
Every detail of the evening displayed the wealth of the Swedish crown. The gathering would eventually become one of the most remembered royal events of its era. Stories about the event spread far beyond the palace walls. Over time, the banquet became a fascinating chapter in Swedish history. According to historical accounts, the king's banquet had been unusually large, even by royal standards.
The meal reportedly included lobster, caviar, smoked fish, sauerkraut, champagne, and several semla pastries.
Historians believe the enormous feast placed a heavy burden on the aging king. Not long after the gathering, the king's condition began to worsen. Soon afterward, Adolf Frederick passed away at the age of 60. Because of the extraordinary banquet that preceded his death, many people connected the two events. Over time, the story became famous throughout Europe and earned the king an unusual place in history. Generations of historians have explored the records of this remarkable banquet, keeping the story alive through the centuries. Whether legend or fact, Adolf Frederick became known as the king who ate himself to death. It is a reminder that even kings, surrounded by wealth and power, are still human. For centuries, kings feared wars, enemies, and assassins. But Adolf Frederick's story would be remembered for a very different reason.